In April 2016, David J. Moore interviewed director Michael Miller about his involvement with Class Reunion for ComingSoon.net, and Miller had this to say.
I was glad to do it, but I was stupid to do it. The definition of a comedy is that nobody gets killed, and we have people get killed in that movie. I got a kick out of it, and the audience liked it, but the salespeople didn't like it. It's still kind of the bastard child of all those National Lampoon movies. I wasn't smart in casting it. If it had starred Chevy Chase or some of those other National Lampoon people, it would have been a different story, but there was no reason to like it. I sat in the screening room of it in Westwood, and it was a full house, and people were screaming and laughing, and afterwards I was told, we're in trouble.
Hello? Operator? Hello? Damn phone company. I'd have more luck with 2 cans and a string.
Somebody do something! The reunion's bombing!
Welcome to Prettium Podcast. In this episode, I'll be looking at John Hughes' first film, National Lampoon's Class Reunion, released October 29th, 1982, and the episode is not spoiler-free. In 1981, National Lampoon editor and writer John Hughes had been attempting to get a screenplay produced. Although Hughes had worked on a high-profile script for the Jaws franchise, it had been 2 years since the script had made it into production. Because of his reputation for fast writing and witty dialogue, Hughes took on work as a script doctor, likely punching up jokes and dialogue for ABC comedies, uncredited. To date, though, his only writing credits had been for 5 episodes of the poorly received ABC television series Delta House. However, things were looking up for John Hughes. The National Lampoon had a 4-picture deal with Paramount 20th Century Fox, and John Hughes was writing for its biggest and most promising property. He was writing National Lampoon's Joy of Sex, a dirty love story, which was to star John Belushi. Hughes had also written a pilot for ABC television called At Ease, which had cast Jimmy Walker, best known as JJ from Good Times. It was while working on these projects that Hughes turned in an original screenplay to Lampoon CEO and producer Matty Simmons. Kirk Honeycutt interviewed Simmons for his book, John Hughes, A Life in Film, and Simmons claims to have initially passed on the script, but had agreed to let Hughes attach the National Lampoon name. With the Lampoon name attached, Hughes was able to set up the film at the fledgling ABC Motion Pictures. National Lampoon's Class Reunion is the story of Lizzie Borden High School's last graduating class and their 10th reunion. The reunion takes place in the decrepit halls of the school, which closed in 1972 after an unfortunate incident stemming from a cruel high school prank, where a paper bag disguised Walter Baylor received a handjob from his also disguised twin sister. Baylor, driven insane by the incident, either killed or violated his parents and was placed in the hospital for the criminally insane. On the night of his 10th reunion, Baylor escapes and returns to Lizzie Borden High, wearing a paper bag over his head, Catholic schoolgirl uniform, and saddle shoes, to take revenge on his old schoolmates, the snooty prep Bob Spinnaker, pantyhose model Meredith Modess, and a loose collection of misfits, stoners, stereotypes, and B-movie outcasts. Though the film has since developed a small cult following thanks to its status as an early horror slasher spoof, it's an anomaly in the oeuvre of both National Lampoon and John Hughes. In intervening years, those involved with the picture have either distanced themselves from the work or quickly moved on to higher profile or more successful projects. Unsurprisingly, little has been written about the origins of Class Reunion, which leaves plenty of room for speculation. Back in 1980, Hughes had been working with fellow Lampoon editor and writer P.J. O'Rourke on a screenplay for Paramount Pictures that intended to build upon the previous successes of the National Lampoon 1964 high school yearbook parody, which was published in 1973, and its 1978 sequel, National Lampoon's Sunday newspaper parody. This would eventually result in Hughes and O'Rourke's screenplay, National Lampoon's The History of Ohio from the Dawn of Time Until the End of the Universe, aka Dakron, Ohio, which had little to do with the source material. The project was abandoned around June of 1980. It's my belief that Class Reunion was first outlined by Hughes around this time as a possible direction for the Dacron script, since so much of what made it into the Reunion screenplay seems straight out of the Sunday newspaper parody, or rather the headlines of the Dacron Republican-Democrat. The central running gag of the fake newspaper is the Powder Room Prowler. Several articles describe the Prowler as wearing a paper bag over his head and comment on his unique footwear. Since presenting fake newspaper articles makes for bad podcasting, I've reimagined and re-edited a few articles as the Dacron, Ohio Nightly News for Sunday, February 12th, 1978.
TV5, Republican-Democrat News with Larry Mickle, Tish Sweater, and Republican-Democrat News Team. Good evening, everyone. This is the news. Dacron's Powder Room Prowler has struck terror into the ladies' room for the 6th time this year yesterday. His latest victim, Miss Belinda Hinky, was returning from a shopping trip to the Corngate Plaza Shopping Center when she stopped to freshen up at a Shell station on the corner of Monroe Street and Secor Avenue. It was there that the Prowler was apparently lying in wait, concealed within the Shell station's women's comfort facilities. Miss Hinky was treated at Forest Lawn Memorial Hospital for stomach trouble and released. The Prowler is described as a man between the ages of 21 and 41. He is of medium build. He is white. He is a tall young man with a polite manner who wears strange high-heeled shoes and has a bag over his head. A special police Prowler task force, headed by Chief Carl Lepper, is continuing its investigations and promises to catch the Prowler, quote, as soon as we find out who did it. Tish?
Thanks, Larry. Well, lately, life at Ben Earl Day School has been positively wonderful. There have been scads of fabulous parties all week long, and the whole Corvette staff has been an absolute tizzy.
I suspect that the initial version of Class Reunion was written sometime between April and July 1981, when the Writers Guild of America went on strike over residuals for pay television, videocassettes, and video discs. Around this time, Hughes, still working as an editor and contributor for the National Lampoon magazine, gave up his editorial position. The last issue, with his name as editor on the masthead, is May 1981, aka the aptly named Naked Ambition issue. Because of the union strike, Hughes was unable to work on any scripts that he was under contract for, which would have given him ample time to develop his own ideas, instead of those handed down from Matty Simmons and studio heads. Reunion was likely presented to producer Matty Simmons sometimes in or before late August 1981, but couldn't be a direct sequel to the Lampoon's yearbook and Sunday newspaper parodies because Paramount had abandoned its sequel only a year prior and likely still held an option for the Dacron, Ohio film. However, the screenplay may also just have been written by Hughes unrelated to the Sunday newspaper parody, and the parallels merely coincidence. At the time of the deal, ABC Motion Picture Division was not considered a serious production studio. They had yet to have any success with feature films, despite ABC President Brandon Stoddard having engineered many successful projects, including the miniseries Roots. Though the film division was able to utilize ABC's vast cross-media resources, the studio had a gingerly approach to film production and depended heavily on the flexibility to move a theatrical feature to television or vice versa. ABC's first foray into comedy with the National Lampoon brand was the Animal House television spin-off Delta House, which received a rather tepid response. So why would the National Lampoon pursue an R-rated horror spoof rather than a more traditional, family-friendly comedy? There are likely a few reasons. First, there was precedent. Mel Brooks had a hit in 1974 with his horror comedy Young Frankenstein, and by 1980, the slasher film had crossed into the mainstream, thanks to films like Friday the 13th and Prom Night. Horror movies were cheap to make and seemed mostly immune to critique. But more importantly, they almost always made money. John Landis, who had directed National Lampoon's Animal House and the Blues Brothers, had recently released his own comedy feature, An American Werewolf in London, on August 21st, 1981, which was number one at the box office and took in almost $3.8 million its opening weekend. ABC Motion Pictures' motives could probably be best summed up by the opening shot of a Paramount Pictures horror comedy, Student Bodies, also released in August 1981. The film opened with a simple title card that read, in part, Last year, 26 horror films were released. None of them lost money. ABC greenlit the project, and Hughes completed his final draft by January 20th, 1982. The studio had brought on Michael Miller to direct. Miller had built his career with two Roger Corman-produced slasher films, Street Girls in 1975 and Jackson County Jail in 1976, and had just completed directing Chuck Norris in Silent Rage. Miller, along with casting director Karen Ray, began to assemble the cast, which was set to begin filming sometime in February 1982. Early on in production, Matty Simmons, who initially rejected the film, came on as producer. By Simmons' account, production was going poorly, and he was asked by Brandon Stoddard to produce the film after a previous producer had been fired. Much of the written account of the film's on-set production comes from actor Blackie Dammett. Dammett played the criminally insane Walter Baylor in the film, and these days, Dammett is best known as the father of Red Hot Chili Peppers' Anthony Kiedis and subject of the song Savior from their 1999 album Californication. But before that, he was a young actor attempting to break into the television and film industry and had already landed memorable supporting roles in Charlie's Angels and Starsky and Hutch. Dammett talks about National Lampoon's class reunion in Lords of the Sunset Strip, a self-released memoir published in 2013. The following excerpt has been heavily edited down.
I went to Karen Ray's West LA office near Fox and joined a mob of prospects for the major casting call. I was auditioning for Walter Baylor, the mental patient who was the focal point of the film. The casting staff put us into teams of two, and mine was with Miss Tabaszewski, the cafeteria rotten cook that my character dismembers with a chainsaw. The actor was Ann Ramsey, Danny DeVito's mother in Throw Mama from the Train and Mama Fratelli in The Goonies. We had good chemistry, and I was set for final auditions. I showed up a week later for the grand final competition at their movie mogul skyscraper in Century City. I was up against a dozen well-known comic actors and Robert Englund, who would make his mark as Freddy on Nightmare on Elm Street. I drew the inside rail for a partner. She was Shelley Smith, an elegant former model and talented actress who had just completed an award-winning TV series in New York called The Associates. The scene they gave us was Walter Baylor trying to seduce Meredith Modeste in my secret hiding place deep in the high school's basement. Our do-or-die stage was in ABC chairman Brandon Stoddard's penthouse suite. But on this occasion, there were also several top executives from ABC and 20th Century Fox, director Michael Miller and Karen Ray and Matty Simmons himself. The jury was sitting behind a big conference table, and I threw Shelley right on the table in front of them. I tore my shirt off without decorum. The buttons flew around the room like exploding bullets. I dove on top of her, and she got so excited she ripped off her own blouse, filling the air with more flying buttons and the scent of her perfume. We rocked and writhed in the laps of startled executives. It was bravos and kudos, and we walked out of there with all of Jagger's lost satisfaction. You should have seen the looks that half-naked Shelley got when we rejoined the other actors in the waiting room. Shelley and I were both cast in the film. Still a rookie, at $2,500 a week, I was the lowest paid primary actor in the cast. Gerrit Graham was top billed and earned $60,000 a week.
For Reunion, Miller also cast National Lampoon's Animal House and Delta House alumni Stephen Furst as the boorish and simple Hubert Downs, a character nearly indistinguishable from his Animal House persona Kent Flounder Dorfman. Miller considered Furst to be a legend in his own right, and had previously cast him alongside Chuck Norris in Silent Rage. Fred McCarran, who had small roles in Xanadu and The Goodbye Girl, landed his first lead role as Gary Nash, the Class Zero, and General Hospital's Jackie Zeman was set to play Jane Washburn. Zeman resigned from her role on General Hospital, playing Bobby Spencer, to attempt to break into film and promised to return to General Hospital if Class Reunion didn't lead to other film work, which it didn't. The cast was enormous, also featuring Misty Rowe, Miriam Flynn, Mews Small, Zane Busby, Barry Diamond, Art Evans, Marla Pennington, Randy Powell, and Michael Lerner. The shoot took place almost entirely at the Pasadena College of Chiropractic, which was in the process of being renovated. The school, formerly known as Washington Middle School, continued to be a popular location after the reunion shoot. Its hallways would appear in Goldie Hawn's Wildcats, episodes of the 1985 revival of the Twilight Zone series, and Michelle Pfeiffer's Dangerous Minds. John Hughes was on set revising and rewriting, but the film hit a major roadblock. One of its principal leads, Blackie Dammett, was injured during filming. Dammett described the ordeal in his memoir.
My stuntman double stood in for most dangerous situations, but I volunteered for many of the tough scenes myself. In my early scenes, I did my terrorizing with a paper bag over my head. I had an assortment of them decorated with creepy lipstick smiles and a bow. My face had hardly been seen. We hadn't gotten to the meat of the film or the opening escape from the mental hospital. Now we were finally in the scenes without the paper bag, and Zane Busby was using her magical powers to fling me high into the air and bash me against a wall.
Walter!
Special effects coordinator Paul Stewart had rigged up to an explosive catapult that had launched me. His overcharged calculation was faulty, and I slammed into a support beam that split my breastbone. They rushed me to the hospital and put me back together, but the diagnosis was to take time off and recuperate. The financial producers suggested replacing me. They could keep my early paper bag footage and let someone else finish the film. Whoa, there was no way I was giving up my part. I walked out of the hospital with my open-in-the-rear gown and returned to the set.
Roughly a year later, on July 23, 1982, Dammett's special effects nemesis and explosives expert Paul Stewart was on the set of The Twilight Zone the movie when a Bell UH-1 Iroquois helicopter crashed during a stunt. The accident resulted in the deaths of actor Vic Morrow and two child actors, Micah Din Lee and Renee Shin Yi Chen. Paul Stewart was one of 5 people tried and acquitted on charges of manslaughter. The accident led to new safety methods and procedures in the film industry that weren't present during the class reunion shoot. John Hughes stayed on the set of Class Reunion just long enough to complete filming a cameo. He played the role of Walter's unnamed twin sister, hidden beneath a paper bag. But at some point during filming, only 2 days by Hughes' account, he was asked to leave the set, and again, in Hughes' words, the screenplay was completely butchered. Compared to Hughes' screenplay, key scenes were rearranged, scenes showing Baylor's escape from the mental hospital, which had been filmed, were excised from the film, and a ridiculous cameo by Chuck Berry was shoehorned into the final cut, possibly to promote Berry's HBO special, Chuck Berry Live at the Roxy with Tina Turner, which was set to air around the time of Reunion's release. Though Chuck Berry's appearance is wildly out of place for a class that graduated in 1972, one of the highlights of Class Reunion is its music. Director Michael Miller had brought along the composers of Silent Rage, Peter Bernstein and Mark Goldenberg, formerly of LA power pop group The Cretones, to score Class Reunion, which included a theme performed by Gary U.S. Bonds, and a creepy score reminiscent of the Universal Studios Creature films, composed by Herman Stein. Peter Bernstein would go on to compose for 21 Jump Street and Weird Science the television series, and Mark Goldenberg would go on to compose the score for Teen Wolf 2, among others. National Lampoon's Class Reunion opened October 29, 1982 on 1,121 screens to mostly bad reviews, many directly targeting the John Hughes script. Hughes, as a writer for the Lampoon, was even then one of the biggest names attached to the film, while the rest of the cast, at least according to Marilyn Uricchio of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, was universally undistinguished. Betsy Marsh in the Cincinnati Enquirer wrote, "The idea, the 10-year reunion of the class of 72 at Lizzie Borden High School is an adequate start. What John Hughes couldn't decide, though, was if he was spoofing high school life, reunion phonies, or slash-gash horror movies." And Michael Mazza, writing for the Arizona Republic, wrote, "John Hughes' screenplay is a jumbled heap of familiar sex jokes and uninspired slasher movie send-ups. Director Michael Miller gets lost in the mess before the end of the first reel." Class Reunion was a disappointment not only to critics, but also to fans of the Lampoon's previous film, Animal House. Hughes, while writing for the Lampoon, had built his reputation on playing up and subverting stereotypes, only to have those stereotypes, which worked so well on the page, come across as clumsy, unsubtle, and worst of all, unfunny. It can be argued that Hughes didn't go nearly far enough. For an R-rated spoof of a slasher film, the violence and nudity were minimal, even in the script. And after all, what's a slasher film without bare breasts and blood? And the biggest trope of the genre, the virginal heroine, is nowhere to be found. There are some indications in the early screenplay and Sanda Chorin's photo novelization of the film of Reunion's potential, But the best example played out in the pages of Heavy Metal magazine, which ran an 8-page graphic preview of the film in their November 1982 issue. Through the artistic lens of Bernie Wrightson, co-creator of Marvel's Swamp Thing, and letterer and colorist Michelle Wrightson of Women's Comics, the panels depict the paper bag prank, the upright vacuum cleaner incident, and the motive for Baylor's escape from the hospital for the criminally insane, a redirected piece of mail, all with a cinematic flair that the final film was unable to deliver. 5 weeks after its release, National Lampoon's Class Reunion disappeared from theaters. Though Hughes was considered a fast and brilliant writer, for his past few projects he wrote about things well outside his own experience, and finally seeing his work on screen would change his work for the better. One needs only compare Class Reunion to Hughes' next foray into writing about high school, The Breakfast Club. Side note, Hughes wrote The Breakfast Club before 16 Candles. Like Reunion, The Breakfast Club's action is restricted to a single environment, a high school, and Hughes would narrow down his cast of characters to the more manageable and relatable tropes of a brain, and an athlete, and a basket case, a princess, and a criminal, pairing them off by the film's end. And if that's not a compelling enough parallel, take each film's version of the makeover scene. First, Zane Busby as Dolores Salk and Miriam Flynn as Bunny Packard in Class Reunion, followed by Ali Sheedy as Allison Reynolds and Molly Ringwald as Claire Standish in The Breakfast Club. Take a listen.
Dolores, are you all right? Well, do you want a Valium? Dolores, I'm trying to help out here. Now, what seems to be the problem? You know, actually, you could use a little lip gloss. And I hope you don't mind, but a little dental floss. And I'd love to see you in short hair. What do you think? Oh, now, come on. Nothing that drastic. Just maybe a cucumber facial. They're marvelous. I'd love to arch these eyebrows, clean up some of the strays here. Oh, I'd love to try a henna rinse on you. Because, I mean, let's face it, you got good bone structure, but you're not a pretty girl.
Don't be afraid. Don't stick that in my eye. I'm not sticking. Just close that. No, wait. Just go like that. Good. You know, you really do look a lot better without all that black shit in your eyes. Hey, I like that black shit. This looks a lot better. Look up. Oh, Liz. Why are you being so nice to me? Because you're letting me?
Though the dialogue and tone are quite different, the similarities between the two scenes are striking. Class Reunion, for what it's worth, is ultimately a seminal work that led to greater things. I'll give John Hughes the final word, excerpted from his interview with the American Film Institute in 1985.
Class Reunion was a great experience because it was really good for me, I think, to go out first thing and just be humiliated into a hole. You know, it was, you know, I started out with what I'd hoped was going to be like, because I'd gone to my class reunion and I'd seen how nobody changed. You know, like they had all these separate lives, but they all got back together again, and they were the same people, and they had the same groups, and it turned into this thing. It was on cable the other night, and I was like bopping through the channels, and I was like, God, this is awesome. Because I saw it once in a theater when it came out, and I'm leaving the theater. I had the theater owner yelling at me. You know? He was really, because he'd booked it for a month, you know, thinking it was going to be Animal House, and he was real mad. And I'm sorry, and I think every piece of footage was in the final cut. I went to 2 days and got asked to leave because I wasn't laughing at dailies, which I thought was, you're not laughing at dailies, right? Which I also learned a great thing is, which is not to pay attention to the laughs in the dailies.
Stop in the name of love before you break my heart. Think it over. Think it over. Come on, everybody. Baby, baby, I'm aware of where you go.
Pretty in Podcast was written, produced, and performed by 517, which is me. Theme music is by Brad Davis, and you can look up Pretty in Podcast on Facebook and Twitter, and show notes and corrections at prettyimpodcast.com. Most of the show notes provide additional images, info, and sources that didn't make it into the episode. Also, subscribe and rate on iTunes. It'll help other people find the show and encourage me to bring out episodes with a bit more frequency. More episodes soon. Special thanks to Tanya Simpson for providing the voice of Tish Sweater, and Kelly Hope. Almost 2 years ago, Kelly co-hosted an earlier incarnation of this podcast, which was more of an aimless conversation.
The thing that disappointed me was when my favorite character in the movie used feminist as an insult.
Oh, Dolores Salk?
Yeah, I liked her.
Who is played by... You have the...
I've got the thing. Zane Busby. I liked her character, because her character was super weird.
Listen, we'll go back. We'll tell them that we checked every door and window and they were all locked. They'll never know we tried only 2.
Do you really think they'll buy that?
Yeah.
So ignorant, they probably will.
Yeah.
Those are my friends you're talking about.
Oh, any asshole in a pair of Calvins can be your friend.
Oh, well, let me tell you a thing or two, Miss Dolores Salk. I wasn't the one this class voted most likely to betray her country.
You feminist.
Weirdo.
Virgin.
Who told you that?
Everybody.
Can't you stop this senseless bickering?
Oh, go get back!
Next time on Pretty in Podcast, I'm going to continue the National Lampoon's class reunion conversation with a discussion about its location, Pasadena College of Chiropractic, which extended a little bit outside of the scope of what I wanted to do with this episode. So I made it its own.
What Carl Jung was trying to say is that trapped inside of each of us, there is a woman that comes out when we fuck up real bad.
You mean there's a woman trapped inside of me?
Yeah.
A black woman or a white woman?
A Jewish woman. I don't know.